morning, my friends. I'm coming to you from Namaste Yoga in Kensington, the studio where I teach regularly. So this is where the recording worked out, but delighted to be with you virtually. So for our little flow for the week, we'll just sort of explore, and in the way that sort of astronauts explore outer space, as yogis, or sometimes somanauts, kind of exploring our bodies and what works and what doesn't, being curious, noticing any sensations that come about. And so we'll do a couple of postures here for the next 20 to 30 minutes or so, and then I'll close with a lovely poem by Wendell Berry. So for a little practice here, have a couple of blocks or books or supports or something like that, and maybe a blanket or a cushion or something that you can sit on and that can provide support both when we're seated and then later on in our relaxation posture. So let's begin just in a simple seated position for right now. Any sort of cross-legged position is fine. If it's more comfortable to have your legs extended out in front of you, that is okay too. But whichever position you've chosen, taking a moment to just arrive and greet yourself. Just slowing down, maybe closing the eyes. Taking a nice deep inhalation. And just letting something go as you exhale. And just noticing what it feels like. Just breathe slowly and calmly. Noticing if the breath goes a little bit deeper. And just taking a moment now as you've arrived on your mat to just greet yourself here. Greet all of yourself. As we continue on our Lenten journey through the wilderness. Still important to be compassionate with ourselves and non-judgmental. So taking a moment here to just bring both hands to prayer position here to heart center. Be finding an intention for your practice. And softly opening the eyes. And we'll keep the hands here just for a bit and do some gentle twisting. So on an inhale, lengthen the spine. Just take a gentle twist over towards the right side. Coming back through the center and then over towards the left. Doing that a few more times back through the center, over to the right, just twisting from the mid to upper back fairly gently, through the center again, and towards the left, just noticing any sensations and focusing on the breath. And releasing the hands, just placing them on top of the kneecaps here, and we'll work a little bit with some seated cats and cows. So often we do this on all fours, but on an inhale, drawing the shoulder blades together, lifting the chest. And then as you exhale, rounding the spine, maybe gazing towards the belly, creating space between the vertebrae and between the shoulders. I'm just taking a few of these at a pace that works for you. And just exploring the subtle body feels like, what the sensations are for you. Exploring is an important part of being in the wilderness as well. And then we'll come back, finding a bit of stillness here through the center. And then placing your right hand next to your right hip, bringing the left arm up overhead. Taking a little side bend. Inhaling up through to center, and then over towards the left. It's making it kind of a free flowing movement here. Coming over towards one side and then the other. Just sort of exploring. Good. And then we'll come back through to the center once more. And taking a couple of shoulder rolls, noticing if there's any tension in the upper back. That is a spot where many of us tend to hold it. And then taking some shoulder rolls in the other direction. And continuing to move the spine in all of its 6 directions here very briefly, walking the hands out in front of you. They don't have to go very far, just lengthening the spine a little bit. Making a gentle forward fold variation here. And then walking the hands back to the center, this time placing them behind you with the fingers facing forward. And finding a gentle back bend, lifting the chest and sternum. Good. And then slowly releasing. And from here, we'll come just for a few moments onto our backs. And so keeping the knees bent as you lower down. We'll continue to warm up the spine with some bridge rolls here. So on an inhale, just gently lifting the hips, engaging the glutes and the backs of the body. And then lowering back down. And the next time, if you'd like, as you lift the hips, you can also take the arms back behind you overhead. And then lowering back down. And again, taking a few of these at your own breath, your own pace. And then the next time you've finished here, gently come onto your right side. So you can use your right forearm to support your upper body here. You can also use a block or perhaps use holding the head in that right hand. And then just beginning to take some arm circles with this left arm here. A little bit of movement into the shoulder joint. And then going in the other direction. And then lowering that top left arm here and straightening the legs out. And then beginning to just lift that top left leg just as far as it'll go here. Do this about 3 times. And then lowering back down. And then coming briefly back onto your back to a neutral spine here. Maybe taking a full body stretch, extending the legs, taking the arms behind you. And then slowly making your way onto your left side here. And again, you can support the upper body perhaps with a prop or perhaps on that left forearm here. And beginning to take some circles with this right arm. And then come back to the other direction. And And then straightening the legs. Extensive props here in different places. And then we'll take these leg lifts as well. We're just lifting that top right leg. Doesn't have to be too far. And then we'll come back onto our bellies here. I'm going to come back to this mat so it's easier to see me. And then coming up onto our forearms, preparing for sphinx pose here. So drawing the mat towards you, and just shining the heart forward here. Using the heart as a lens of exploration here. Legs can be with all 10 toes on the mat here. You can separate them so that they go wider than the hips if that is more comfortable for your lower back, or you can keep them zipped up together. Taking a few breaths here in our sphinx pose. And then slowly lowering down. And then using the arms to push back into a tabletop position here. So option to pad your knees with a blanket if you're on a harder surface. And we'll take a few cats and cows here. So on an inhale, shining the heart forward, drawing the shoulder blades together. Exhale, rounding the spine, gazing towards the thighs. And again, following a few of these at your own breath, your own pace. Just exploring, noticing any sensations. Any messages from the body here. And then coming back towards the center. And from here, the blocks or some books might be helpful to have on either side of your mat. So using the blocks or books for support here, placing your right foot forward between the blocks here, and then coming up, balancing on that left knee, interlacing the hands behind the head, gently opening up the chest here. So supported low lunge. And then lowering the hands back down to the mat or to your blocks, and turning that back toe under, lifting the knee. Placing your left hand very firmly onto the block or maybe into your mat and lifting that right arm up, finding a twist. And releasing back down, dropping that back knee back onto the mat here, and left knee, bringing the right knee to meet it, and then placing the left foot forward. Just preparing here for our low lunge. And then beginning to interlace the hands behind the head here. If you feel comfortable, maybe engage in the abdominals and coming a little bit forward to engage that hip flexor a little bit more. Giving it a nice deep stretch. And then releasing the hands to blocks. This time placing the right hand firmly into a block or the mat, turning that back foot under, lifting the knee, and finding our twist. And then releasing back down. And then using the blocks for support here, slowly stepping that back foot forward so that it comes here to a forward fold towards the top of your mat. And then using the feet to root down, slowly rising up here. Inhaling, bringing both arms up. And exhaling, hands come to heart center for our mountain pose or Tadasana. So taking a moment to just adjust to being upright. And then turning whichever way it's easier to face your screen here. Stepping the feet a little bit wider than the hips, so maybe about 3 feet apart. And eventually we'll have a block with us, but we'll do a few other things first here. So we'll get these out of the way for now. So have your blocks nearby, but they don't have to be right in front. And so standing here in a wide-legged stance. And then we'll just take a few rounds of sun breath here. So on an inhale, bringing both arms up overhead. Exhaling, bringing the hands back down. Inhaling up. Exhale, releasing. And inhaling up. And exhale, releasing. So that sun breath here is a nice way to start the day regardless. And then beginning to turn the toes so that they're facing out just a little ways and bend the knees. Bringing the arms to cactus arms here, goalpost arms, finding our goddess pose. And then we'll come up and straighten arms and legs, finding 5-pointed star. And just exploring here, lowering down to goddess. And coming up to 5-pointed star. And then once more down to goddess. Maybe a little bit lower. And back up to 5-pointed star. And releasing the arms here just for a moment. Finding a nearby block or book or other support. And we'll turn that right foot so that it faces straight to the right side here, just pivoting it towards the side. And then maybe bringing the block to the inside of the foot. We'll prepare a little bit for triangle pose. So beginning to straighten that right knee, bringing the arms out to the side, shifting the hips back behind you, reaching forward, and lowering your hand to the block here, drawing the shoulder blades together and rotating the chest. I want to go a little bit deeper, really rooting through that big toe and noticing how that engages the quad. And again, just noticing whatever is going on in your body. And using the breath, we'll come back up, taking the block with you here, and pivoting on the other side. So that right foot now comes back so that it's straight. Left foot now faces the short side here, straight ahead. Placing the block down just inside that foot. Inhaling, bringing the arms out, shifting the hips backwards, and coming down to our triangle pose on this side. And if it's not comfortable to look up at your thumb, you can always look down at your foot. And then using the breath and the abdominals to come back up. Gently bringing the hands back to heart center. Heel toeing the feet back in. And then coming to our mountain pose, Tadasana. We'll do a little bit of a standing balance here. Since our theme is wilderness, we'll play a little bit with crane pose. So beginning to shift the weight into that left leg. Maybe taking a moment to lift the feet up off the sticky mat and lower them back down. Using the abdominals here. Beginning to raise this right foot, this right leg, just as far as it'll go. Maybe it's just a little ways off the ground. You can certainly use a wall or a chair or something else you have at home here to help this posture. And then bringing the arms up so that the upper arms are still very close to the body, and then the hands just sort of flop forward. And this is crane pose. So you're rooting and rising, and you're also nice and balanced. And then releasing here. Taking a moment to shake out the legs. And then coming to a nice standing posture again, mountain pose, Tadasana. Shifting the weight to the right leg this time, engaging the abdominals and bringing this left knee. Maybe the ball of the foot doesn't come up off the ground, and that's okay. The arms can be out to the sides for additional balance. And then maybe finding your wings here, keeping the upper arms nice and close in, and just letting the fingers hang down. Finding a focal point in front of you that isn't moving. And then slowly releasing. And to counter that pose, taking the feet maybe a little bit wider than hip width apart. And just finding some gentle twisting, swaying from side to side. Being careful of the knees here. Bending whichever knee you're moving to the side of as to not tweak one. But just finding a little bit of a counter pose here. And then coming back to mountain, and we'll play with some standing twists next. So bringing the right arm just to shoulder height. And taking the left arm behind you, maybe gazing at that thumb. And just again, twisting from the upper back. And then switching the arms here. And taking some of these at your own breath, your own pace, your own movement. Just exploring. But meanwhile, twists are also good for getting the toxins out of the body. And then slowly releasing back to our mountain pose. And from here, we'll find a seated position again. So just however you would like to get there. And this time we'll take the legs a little bit wider than the hips. So we'll find a wide-legged forward fold. Doesn't have to be too wide, just whatever you're comfortable with. And a block or a book or a support may come in handy as well. I'll demonstrate both ways. And we'll do a little stretch here that will benefit the quadratus laborum muscle. So it's basically your lower back. And it's comfortable for many of us who are spending a lot of time sitting these days. So taking your right forearm and sliding it just inside that right leg. And again, a block or a book may be supportive here if that forearm doesn't go all the way to the floor. And then bringing the left arm up overhead and rotating the chest, keeping the heart open here. And then using the breath to come up. Taking any little counter movements. And then we'll play with that on the other side. So maybe using a block here, maybe it's not necessary. And then placing that left hand just either on top of the block or inside the leg. Bringing the right arm up overhead. Again, sending the breath to the lower back here. And just exploring, rotating the chest open. And then come back through to the center. And then removing the block. And from here, we'll do one little core strengthening pose before we come onto our backs once more. So removing any flesh from the thighs, really connecting and rooting down with your sit bones. And we'll play with boat pose or Navasana. So keeping the heels on the mat and just staying right here is one option, just working to lengthen the spine and draw the belly towards it. So this is a perfectly good, what one of my teachers called mellow Navasana here. Alternatively, you can come onto the sit bones and bring the calves parallel to the mat here. And this is also a very good variation for straightening the legs, bringing the arms out to the sides. And just noticing here if the work transitions from the legs to the belly, and just exploring that. And then slowly lowering back down. And from here, having one block nearby, we'll come onto our backs. So we'll come this way here. Making sure you have enough room behind you. And then lifting the hips and taking the block or the book and sliding it underneath your sacrum. And then just settling in here. Noticing any release here in supported bridge pose. And maybe staying right here. This is a perfectly good inversion, and that your heart is slightly above your head. But if you want to go a little bit further, you can lift the legs up towards the ceiling. And if you want some additional movement, maybe pointing and flexing the feet. Maybe finding a wide-legged V with your legs. Maybe scissoring them a little bit. That's whatever feels good for the next several breaths. And slowly beginning to lower the legs and feet back down. And before we remove the block or the book, try walking the feet out a little ways. It's just a counter pose to open up the tops of the thighs a little bit. The legs won't straighten all the way. But again, for those of us who sit a lot during the day, this is a nice counter pose to the supported shoulder stand. And then walking the feet back in, just so they're underneath the knees here. Lifting the hips and removing the block out from underneath you. And then drawing the knees in towards the chest. And either finding a little lower back massage here, maybe taking hold just above the kneecaps, or maybe you can find happy baby pose, taking hold of the outer edges of the feet and drawing the knees towards the earth. Just using the next few breaths to find whichever of the cool down poses you prefer. And then you can take your time doing this as you're in your own space. Just settling into Shavasana, our final relaxation pose. So maybe using some supports for under the head and neck. Something underneath the knees to support the lower back. Blanket or a cushion, or certainly a pair of socks, or using a blanket to cover up. And just taking your time getting there. And I'll leave you with a poem that is resonant of our collective journey in the wilderness and the importance of the natural world here and the importance of exploration. And this is The Peace of Wild Things by Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethoughts of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world, and I am free. Thank you so much for joining me here. I wish you a wonderful rest of the week. Feel free to stay in your relaxation pose as long as you would like. Namaste.